Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Missio Discipleship Podcast. My name is Aaron. Guess what time it is? It's 4:30 in the morning, and I am driving to work. So while I'm doing that, I thought it is a great time to be sharing with you how to Bible study. So, we're in the process of developing our Bible study series. Right now, I believe this is part 7 of how to Bible study. And today I'm going to share with you how to apply the scripture. And so I'll just do a really kind of quick overview, recap, so to speak, and then come back through and let's get right into application, which is awesome. I love application. There's a couple of ways that we can do that too. So again, just to recap, so when you're starting Bible study, you want to have this process sorted, right? And initially, when we opened this topic, I gave you a number of illustrations, but the first illustration that I gave you is like a sailor who he doesn't know where he's going, and someone who doesn't know where he's going often gets nowhere, and they're often under-resourced, insufficiently resourced for whatever journey that they're about to take. So even if they got somewhere, it doesn't end up looking good anyway because they were under-resourced, because they hadn't planned and they hadn't had a process. Now, the moment that you instill a process into this circumstance, so like the moment that you go, okay, we're gonna systemize how we study the Bible, and it's not being legalistic or anything like that. It's like God works through systems, guys. You don't have to just be free every time you open up the Bible and just be, oh, whatever God says, He says. No, well, He can very much, and I'd say even more so, He works through the process of the system, because that's how our brains work. And so if we want to communicate with God, we need to do it efficiently and effectively. And so we need to have this process. So like the sailor, he now knows where he's going. He plans out exactly every move, and he resources himself well. It's the same thing. It's very, very logical, and it's just common sense. And it's funny because when I say it's common sense, but it's really only common sense after you know the fact, right? So before that, really, it's not common sense. Anyway, so we always start Bible study at the 30,000 foot view. All right. So when you come to a text, after you select the book, you start reading through the book. You identify the kind of the major theme and all of the connecting parts. You break up the chapters and see how they kind of modify the theme. You're asking the question, what is the author saying? If I can boil it down to one sentence, what is he saying? And on the flip side, if I could boil it down to one sentence, what is the audience hearing or learning for the first time? Then pretty soon you're on the right track. You start breaking up kind of passage breakups in the text, and you'll see how they modify that main theme. And then from there, we can actually start looking into the words of the text. From there, you want to define everything. So interpretation is defining everything that you've discovered in your observation process. So everything that's unclear and has a question mark, then those are the things that you need to go and discover now. And so largely interpretation is just coming to a conclusion based upon the evidence, and really you're just defining everything that's unclear. And a couple of ways that you do that is you compare scripture with scripture. You look at different resources such as gotquestions.org, eSword, different kind of commentators. You break down the words. You look at concordances. You look at Bible lexicons that show us the Greek and the Hebrew meanings. And once you've got that information, you'll start to kind of summarize all of your findings. And that's what you want to do in the interpretation phase, is you want to summarize everything and conclude everything. Here are the concluding thoughts for this. Here are the concluding thoughts for this. Now, once you're there, now you're at the process of application. All right, and you want to leave this to the end, because if you haven't got your interpretation right or your observation right, you're not going to have right application. Right, so it's essential that we have the right information to get the right transformation. Okay? And, all right, so when you're down into that application phase, here's a few things that I want you to ask yourself, okay? I love to do this one in particular. This is how I study the Bible, okay? So if I was to teach you in like a Bible college setting, what Bible study would look like, it might look a little bit different, but when you look at it from a communicator's standpoint and what your audience largely takes away, then I've just systemized it down into this thing. So it's called up, in, and out. Up, in, and out. And I actually took that language from somebody else, Mike Green, I believe. But I took the language and I assigned it to the application of the text. Now, there's a few things that we want to look at when it comes to up, in, and out. So up is your mind, right? Up is your mind. How do I apply this to my thinking? How do I apply this to my doctrinal beliefs? Like, for example, is there something in the text that is telling me that I need to change my mind about something else, right? So perhaps I'm coming in to the text and I believe that Satan, this is an example, I might believe that Satan is equal to God, and therefore I might equate his power on the same level as God's. And then I see something like, let's say, Job chapter 1, where you have Satan asking the permission of God to go and do the things that he does to Job. You would find out very quickly that the doctrine that you need to now believe, the mind shift that you now need to believe, is that Satan is not equal to the power of God. In fact, he's far less. And I mean, you find out so much of this passage, by the way, but you find out that he's not all powerful. You find out that he's just a created being who also lives under the sovereignty of God. And even in his evil, he still has to ask permission as such. Like, God has to, he's still got a hold on the chain, so to speak. But anyway, what that's going to do is that's going to change your mindset about, like what we call a dualistic mindset, where we think that there's an equal good and an equal evil. No, the thing is, guys, is that God is so much more powerful than Satan, right? But that's something that I needed to change in my mind. The other thing is, I might go to Ephesians chapter 5 and let's say verses 22 to 33, I believe, and that's talking about biblical marriage and how marriage is a picture really of the gospel, and then it gives instruction to wives and husbands how to live in this kind of gospel-centric marriage, right? And let's say I could be living for myself, and then I realize what the text actually says, and he says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Well, now I've got to think through, wow, how did Jesus really love the church? Well, he died for us. He instigated and initiated this movement, right? He kind of went above and beyond. He shows grace and mercy. He takes our sin. He intercedes on our behalf. He Yeah, I mean, there's so much, right? But you get the point. And so now I start changing my mind, and a lot of the times when I start changing my mind changes my heart changes my hands. Cool, but that's up. Up is my mind, my intellect. In is my emotions, right? And so when I look through chapters in the New Testament, such as Ephesians chapter 4 and 5, I get a lot of emotional weight tied to the instructions of Paul. How am I feeling? Right? Who am I? That's answered largely in Ephesians 1 and 2. Who am I? My identity. How does it make me feel? How do I deal with anger? How do I deal with the results of my fears? How do I deal with anything that's more internal? That's your in, all right? So up, in, and then the last one is out. And really, that's relationship with others. Okay, so relationship with others. How am I with the family of God? How am I with sharing the gospel to others? How am I with my testimony? How am I with different relationships and different social statuses? How am I with different social strata, like higher economic? Am I partial to people who are rich? I could go to James and look at James chapter 1 and chapter 2, and that's talking about really being partial to those who are rich and being impartial to those being partial to those who are poor. And so that's really an out expression. And so what is this text telling me to do? Is it dealing with a intellect issue, a problem of belief? Is it dealing with an emotional problem? Or is it dealing with a relational problem? All right, so up, in, and out. There's another way to put this too. When we look at up, we can look at everything that's made in the image of God, and when we look in, we can look at everything that is our identity as a whole, and then when we look out, we can look at mission, right? That's just another perspective, but to be honest, that's probably a little bit more deep. If you keep it up at intellect or your mind, inward, your belief system, your heart, your emotional kind of resilience and your internal resources, and then the last one is out, your relational strategies with others. If you start looking there, using that platform, that's a really good platform to do application. You just have to work through, what is it actually teaching me? Is it any one of those? And if you go to any biblical text and you're asking those questions, is it up, is it in, is it out? Honestly, it's going to really pull it out. Now, there's a few things that I want to add to this, because application is largely, it's an art. All right. So what you want to do is you want to stay away from general application. You don't want to end up saying, I need to read my Bible more and I need to pray more. Okay. Because that doesn't change the world. And so if you start asking real dramatic questions, for example, if you said, if I change this, how is that going to transform my life for the better? Right? Then that's going to give you a very specific and even broader view and a long-term view. So if I changed this right now, what would it do in my future? How would it change the world in the future? All right, that will give you a very long-term view. You could say stuff like, I like to do this one where I kind of phrase it in the positive or the negative, right? So let's say I have something that is dealing with the mind. What I can do is I can take it from a problem stance, or I can take it from a positive stance. All right. So I could be like, man, here's the problem, and I need to change this because that's a problem if I don't change it. Or I can say, this is the positive outcome that's going to happen when everything moves this way, this direction. So the more that I'm thinking like this is what's going to happen as a result, a positive result. You see what I mean? So you can state it in the positive and you can state it in the negative. Cool. And so the last thing that you want to do is you want to be asking the who, what, why, when, how questions. The thing is those are always your go-to, because when you ask those questions specifically on top of the up in and out, so when you've identified whether it's up in and out, and you've kind of identified the main principle, right? So this is what I'd like to change, whether positive or negative. Right, this is the principle here, positive or negative. Then what you want to do is you want to say, okay, so where do I need to apply that now? And when is the best time to apply it? Because not every single time you can apply the text immediately. Like I was talking about marriage and you're not married, you can't obviously apply that right now. So when would it be the best time to apply this? How would it look when I apply this in these circumstances? Who do I need to apply this to that perhaps I'm not already applying it to? Why do I need to apply it, and what is the result if I do? Okay, so looking through those questions is great. So let's just do a real quick recap, and I'll kind of finish up one more thing. So the recap is this: identify whether it's up, in, and out. Is it a mind issue, a belief issue? Is it a heart issue, an emotional issue, or is it a relational issue where it's out to others? Okay, that's that. Ask the who, what, why, when, how, where questions of it. State it in the positive or the negative. Ask radical, dramatic questions in order to get you to, like answering in more broad, like to avoid broad subject, or to avoid the kind of broad element, the broad general strokes. You don't want that. You want specific. So ask radical questions to get there. And then the last one is principalize the point. Okay, principalize the point. So in the questioning phase, you ask, okay, who do I need to apply this to? And then answer it in a principle. So once you've got what you actually need to do, state it in a principle. Right, state it in a principle. And the more catchy it is, the more spiritual it is. No, I'm joking. But that's what top communicators do. They make their principles super catchy. All right, anyway, that's that. That's application. I love application, but application is absolutely an art, and it needs to be practiced. Now, on the next podcast, what we're going to do is I'm going to teach you what it looks like to really go through a text and manage your time. And then I might just, we'll see what happens if I'm able to do it, actually get into one of the texts and let me show you what it looks like. I might reserve that for a video, but at least I want to deal with how do you take 7 episodes of stuff and boil it down to a 15-minute Bible study, right, and do that throughout the week. Cool, guys. Well, that's me for today. I hope you have a good day. Okay, have a good day. Bye-bye.